The lie was so bold it almost sounded official. The man at the defense table stood in a sharp black suit, silver tie pin catching the courtroom light, and announced in a smooth, polished voice that he was counsel of record, a licensed attorney, and fully prepared to correct the many factual distortions being weaponized against his client. For one strange second the room accepted it. Then Judge Caprio asked one quiet question, the kind of question only a dangerous mind asks when it already knows the answer, and the color drained from the man's face so fast it was like watching a mask melt in public. The victim looked up. The gallery leaned forward. The bailiff took one step closer. And in that instant, everyone could feel it. Something far bigger than a simple hearing was about to detonate in open court. At the plaintiff's table sat Lena Ortiz, a single mother in a modest cream sweater with a frayed cuff, her dark hair pulled back too tightly, as if control was the only luxury she could still afford. She held a folder against her chest with both hands, not dramatically, but protectively, like it contained the last clean version of the truth. Across from her sat Grant Holloway, a real estate investor with polished loafers, a watch that gleamed like a threat, and the posture of a man who had been told yes so often he now heard it in silence. Beside him stood the supposed lawyer, Victor Hale, tan briefcase, white pocket square, expensive cologne hanging in the air, jaw set in smug confidence. They looked like money. Lena looked like exhaustion. And if you've ever watched power walk into a room expecting the pour to fold on cue, then stay with this one, because when the truth finally hit, it hit hard enough to shake the whole courthouse. And before this story ends, tell me the exact moment you knew they were done. On paper, the case looked almost ordinary. Lena alleged that Grant Holloway had illegally locked her out of the duplex apartment she rented after she complained about mold, exposed wiring, and a bathroom ceiling leak that had caved in during a storm. Grant claimed she was a chronic late payer, a manipulator, and a tenant trying to exploit the system. Victor Hale, or the man calling himself that, was there to make sure that version sounded clean, credible, and expensive. He objected before Lena finished her first sentence. He sighed when she searched for a date. He smiled when her voice trembled. It was not the smile of a man pursuing justice. It was the smile of a man enjoying the imbalance. Judge Caprio noticed immediately. He always did. The courtroom lights cast that flat pale glow across the polished wood, and under that light every smirk, every twitch, every inch of contempt looked sharper than it probably felt. Lena explained that she lived in the upstairs unit with her 8-year-old son, Mateo, who suffered from asthma. She said the mold spread behind the bathroom wall first, then crawled into the hallway, then into the bedroom vent. She said she had sent messages. She said she had begged for repairs. She said Grant's office ignored her until the city inspector came. After that, she said, everything changed. First came threats. Then came sudden notices. Then, one rainy Friday, when she returned from a double shift at the pharmacy, her key no longer worked. Her son's inhaler was still inside. Her winter coats were still inside. Her paycheck stub, her medications, her dead mother's necklace, all still inside. She said she pounded on the door until a neighbor called the police. While she spoke, Victor Hale kept shuffling papers with theatrical impatience, like her suffering was interrupting his evening plans. Then came the first twist. Judge Caprio asked Victor for his bar number. The courtroom went silent. Victor smiled too quickly. "Of course, Your Honor, I don't have it memorized." Judge Caprio nodded once. "That's unusual." Victor laughed, but it was thin now. "I don't make a habit of reciting administrative details in open court." Judge Caprio's expression did not move. Counselors do when they're asked. Grant shifted in his chair for the first time. Just a little. Just enough. Victor reached into his briefcase, produced a business card, and slid it forward with 2 fingers. His cufflink flashed. His hand was steady, but only if you didn't look at the thumb. That was where the tremor lived. Judge Caprio looked at the card for less than 2 seconds. "Interesting," he said softly. "Rhode Island spells that word with an E. Your card does not." A sound ran through the gallery like an electrical current. Not loud, just whispers. Tiny, stunned whispers. Victor tried to recover. "A printing error." "That would be one error," Judge Caprio said. "The more serious issue is that this bar number belongs to a woman from Cranston who has been licensed for 19 years. That's when everything changed." Victor's face hardened. He stopped pretending to be relaxed. Grant turned to him with sudden alarm. eyes narrowing, the first shadow of betrayal crossing his face. Lena looked from one man to the other as if she could barely believe what she was hearing. The bailiff moved closer again. Judge Caprio asked Victor, now with unmistakable steel in his voice, whether he was in fact licensed to practice law in the state. Victor straightened and made the fatal choice arrogant people always make when the exit is still open, but their pride is bigger than survival. "Your Honor," he said, "licensure is a technicality. I am more than qualified to speak on this matter." Gasps burst across the courtroom. Judge Caprio leaned back, and when he spoke, his voice was calm in the way thunderclouds are calm before they split the sky. "No, sir, it is not a technicality. It is the law, and pretending to be an attorney in my courtroom is not advocacy. It is fraud with a necktie." The courtroom went dead silent. Grant started whispering furiously at Victor now, but Victor was too deep in it to stop. He doubled down. He claimed he was functionally equivalent counsel. He claimed his legal consulting background made formal credentials irrelevant. He even had the audacity to say, "Frankly, Your Honor, the plaintiff's side is only objecting because they're intimidated by competence." That line changed the energy of the room completely. Not because it was clever, because it was so nakedly contemptuous, so deeply disrespectful, that everyone could suddenly see the shape of the entire scam. Lena lowered her eyes for 1 second, then lifted them again, and there was something new there now. Not fear, recognition. Judge Caprio ordered the clerk to contact the State Bar immediately. While that verification was in motion, he turned back to the underlying case and asked Lena if she had documentation of the lockout. Her hands shook as she opened the folder, but her voice came steadier now, as if the air itself had shifted in her favor. She produced texts from Grant's property manager telling her to learn gratitude, inspection photos showing black mold blooming behind Mateo's bed, and a city notice requiring remediation within 10 days. Then she offered the thing Grant clearly had not expected her to have: video. A neighbor's doorbell camera showed Lena on that Friday night in the rain, her son coughing into her shoulder, plastic grocery bags at her feet, trying the key again and again. Then the camera caught Grant himself stepping out of a black SUV, umbrella over his head, expensive coat untouched by the weather, as Lena begged him to open the door so she could get her child's inhaler. The audio was thin but clear enough when amplified. Grant said, "Maybe next time you'll pay before you complain." Lena said, "My son can't breathe." And Grant, without even looking at the child, answered, "That's not my emergency." The courtroom went silent again. A woman in the back covered her mouth. One of the officers near the wall actually looked away for a moment. Grant leaned toward the mic, trying to sound reasonable, but panic had already started roughening the edges of his voice. "That's out of context," he said. "She was being disruptive. I was protecting my property." Judge Caprio asked him if a child's inhaler counted as his property too. Grant didn't answer. He couldn't, because now the case was no longer a landlord dispute. Now it was cruelty, now it was retaliation, now it was the kind of moral ugliness that even paperwork cannot sanitize. Then the clerk received confirmation from the bar. Victor Hale was not licensed, not suspended, not inactive, not retired, not out of state counsel, nothing. He had never been admitted to practice law anywhere in the United States. This time, the gasps weren't scattered. They hit all at once. Grant shot to his feet. "What?" The word cracked out of him before he could make it elegant. Victor tried to speak, but Judge Caprio raised one hand, and the whole room stopped with him. "Sit down," he said. Victor did not sit. "I said sit down." The second time, it landed like a gavel inside the bones. Victor dropped into the chair. That should have been enough to end him. It wasn't, because then the prosecutor assigned to observe the calendar stepped forward and quietly informed the court that the name Victor Hale had appeared on at least 3 prior housing matters in the last 2 months. Different landlords, different tenants, same polished act, same pressure tactics, same pattern, vulnerable renters intimidated into signing away claims because they believed a real attorney was threatening them. A low fury spread through the gallery. It was no longer about one woman. It was bigger now, layered, systemic, deliberate. That's when everything changed for the last time. Judge Caprio asked Lena whether any documents had been presented to her by Victor. She nodded and pulled out a stapled packet. corners bent from being handled too many times in fear. It was titled Notice of Immediate Civil Liability and Emergency Eviction Enforcement. The language was pompous, aggressive, and legally absurd. Buried near the bottom was a demand that she waive claims related to mold exposure in exchange for conditional mercy regarding removal proceedings. Her eyes filled then, but she didn't cry. She said the words quietly, and because they were quiet, everyone listened harder. I almost signed it because he looked official. No one in that room would forget that sentence. Judge Caprio folded his hands, looked first at Lena, then at Grant, then finally at Victor, who by now had lost all color and all swagger. And then came the monologue, calm, precise, devastating. Let me tell you exactly what I see here. I see a child with asthma sleeping beside mold while a landlord calculates leverage. I see a mother working double shifts trying to keep a roof over her son's head while being told that basic repairs are a privilege. I see a man with money deciding that law is not something to obey but something to costume himself in. And I see another man, not a lawyer, not a counselor, not an officer of any court, putting on a suit, printing a card, lowering his voice, and borrowing the appearance of justice so he can frighten ordinary people into surrender. That is not sophisticated. It is predatory. It is cowardly. It is contempt wearing polish. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed too loudly. Even the fluorescent hum seemed smaller. Then Judge Caprio delivered the line that would have lived online for weeks if anyone had scripted it for virality. A fake lawyer is just a con artist who found a better tie. The room erupted in whispers. He didn't stop there. Mr. Holloway, you thought poverty would do the heavy lifting for you. You thought exhaustion would silence her. You thought a child's inhaler could become bargaining collateral. You thought if the intimidation looked official enough, she would fold. And sir, that may be how bullies operate in hallways, offices, and backroom phone calls, but it is not how justice works in this courtroom. The law is not your private security detail, it is not your rent collector, it is not your costume department. It belongs equally to the woman in the worn sweater and the man in the expensive watch, and today it sees you both very clearly. Grant's bravado collapsed right there. You could watch it happen piece by piece. The chin lowered, the shoulders tightened, the lips dried out. He tried to blame Victor. He said he had assumed Victor was licensed. He said he had been misled. Victor, now sweating visibly, turned on Grant and muttered that Grant had hired him specifically because real lawyers cost too much to threaten people this way. The courtroom reacted like it had been slapped. Grant cursed under his breath. The bailiff stepped closer. Lena stared at them both with a kind of stunned stillness, as if after months of fear she was finally watching the machine jam itself. Judge Caprio ruled in Lena's favor on the housing claims before him, ordered immediate damages for unlawful lockout, property deprivation, and retaliatory conduct, and referred the matter for emergency review by housing enforcement and criminal investigators. He directed that Victor be detained pending identification review and forwarded for prosecution related to unauthorized practice of law, fraud, and possible extortion. Then he turned to Grant with one final look so cold it seemed to strip the shine off the man entirely. You tried to turn the courthouse into a weapon against the weak, he said. Instead, you turned it into a mirror. That was the end of whatever performance they thought they were giving. Victor stood too quickly as officers approached, knocking his briefcase open. Papers spilled across the floor, fake letterheads, templated threats, copied seals, stacks of intimidation dressed as legal procedure. The sight of it sent a shock through the room. Not one lie, a factory of lies. Grant started shouting that this was insanity, that his reputation would be destroyed, that he had investors, obligations, standing. Judge Caprio didn't even raise his voice when he answered. You should have thought about your standing before you tried to crush someone who was already struggling to stand. Lena exhaled then, a small broken sound she seemed to have been holding in for months. Not triumph, release, pure release. The clerk handed her tissues. She thanked him. Even then, even after everything, she thanked him. Weeks later, the city forced repairs on the building. Other tenants came forward with similar complaints, and 2 prior victims identified Victor as the man who had bullied them into signing away claims they barely understood. Grant's business name, once polished and prestigious, began appearing in local reports for all the wrong reasons. Lena and Mateo moved into a safer apartment through an emergency assistance program, and Mateo's breathing improved within days. People who had watched that hearing did not remember the fake credentials first. They remembered the moment the lie cracked. They remembered the dead, silent courtroom. They remembered the judge who could hear moral rot hiding beneath legal language and refused to let it pass. Because that is what justice feels like when it finally arrives for the arrogant. Not theatrical for its own sake, not noisy just to be noisy, clear, merciless, moral. A fake lawyer tried to lie in court, and for a few smug minutes he thought the costume would hold. But truth has a way of making cheap fabric split at the seams. So if this story hit you, if that final collapse felt as satisfying as it should have, tell me in the comments which line buried them. Like this, subscribe for more courtroom dramas where the powerful finally hear the word no, and share it with someone who needs the reminder that sometimes the most dangerous thing a liar can meet is a judge who already knows what truth sounds like.